Good afternoon. My name is Alan Quinn. I am new to the Cars.co.za podcast. I'm the executive head of brand and marketing. And my guest today is Mikel Mabasa from NAAMSA. As a first thing, what is NAAMSA?
NAAMSA is a very important organization in South Africa. We represent all the original equipment manufacturers in the country, people who make cars. Whether you make those cars in South Africa, you make them elsewhere out of South Africa, and you import them into South Africa, those companies that are in South Africa selling cars as original equipment manufacturers, they are members of NAAMSA. We currently have about 65 of them.
65?
Yes, because we do not only represent members who are manufacturing passenger vehicles, but we also represent those who are manufacturing light commercial vehicles. In South Africa, we call them bakkies. And we also represent those who are manufacturing medium and also heavy commercial vehicles. There we obviously speaking about your buses, your trucks, heavy trucks. So all those guys who are selling, marketing, and doing everything about cars in the country are members of NAAMSA, and we represent their non-commercial interests. Because remember, South Africa is obviously a very sensitive competition country. We've got some very strict competition rules in our country. Anything that is not competition related, NAAMSA looks at it, and we work with our members.
I did see a stat recently. The automotive industry is actually huge in South Africa.
Absolutely. So if you look at our contribution to the economy, we contribute about 5.3% to our gross domestic product, to our GDP.
I was thinking the other day, 5% is a very large number.
Absolutely. And it's a very big number because, if you look at the different sectors of the economy, what makes the South African economy to tick, whether you're looking at it from the lens of agriculture, tourism, or any other sector, mining, for an example, because South Africa was, came out of the mining sector in the main. Remember when, in early days when, the two of us were still very young, many, many years ago, we were able to build the automotive industry, which, by the way, it's 100 years old. The automotive industry started manufacturing vehicles in South Africa in 1924. So last year we celebrated our centenary, and this year we're 101 years old and growing. And when you look at where we are today, relative to where we were at the time, it's chalk and cheese. And we are really here to make a contribution to the economic life of South Africa.
But when you bring it back, so like 5% of the parties at Spur are paid for by the automotive industry. 5% of the goods bought at Pick and Pay is paid for by the automotive industry. You're right. I mean, so back in the 1990s, the gold price was everything to South Africa.
Absolutely.
Now, the automotive industry has really risen up and taken that place.
Absolutely. I actually want you to think of it differently. So in order for you to be able to have your fresh loaf of bread every morning, we are responsible for bringing that bread to your table. In order for us to be able to make sure that all our retailing partners, all the big stores are able to receive goods and services on time, we're able to move all those products, from point A to point B. We bring people to their respective jobs. We move people through our taxis. We move people through private vehicles that, we own as consumers. So we really get the industry to move every day. And without the work that we do, the South African economy, or any other economy for that matter, not just only in South Africa, but everywhere else in the world, will come to a grinding halt.
It's not just, as a consumer, you often think like auto industry's dealerships.
Absolutely.
Which are important.
Yeah.
Yes, as employers in this country.
Yeah.
But behind those dealerships is, as you mentioned, 65 manufacturers.
Yeah.
They have to import. They have to make parts.
Yeah.
And that's just a huge economy, a lot of employment.
Absolutely. So if you look at our entire value chain, it's a massive value chain. From it actually starts from the mining industry itself, because the minerals that we mine out of our ground, take copper for an example, which we use for our wiring harness. all the wires that goes into making our technology to work as efficiently as it does today, because our vehicles today are actually computers on cars. So from the mining companies that are mining these minerals, and we transform those minerals, raw minerals, into steel, into copper, into anything you can think about. We speak about agriculture. When we, for an example, work with our colleagues in agriculture, the leather seat that you sit on in your vehicle is a leather seat that came because of the support that we have from the agricultural sector. We look at our seats, our carpets, our plastics in terms of our dashboards. So it starts from mining, it goes up and up and up, manufacturing of components, as you said, and then all those little components. I mean, did you know that there's obviously more than 6,000 different components that we are able to bring together in order for us to be able to put a vehicle. And then all those components obviously get into a vehicle. Once that vehicle is produced, it gets into a dealership, to your point earlier, which is our biggest interface with our consumers, because that's where consumers are able to go into a dealership and interface with us as a sector. And we are very pleased, that Cars.co.za is now talking about this dealer con, which for us is an amazing opportunity to be able to get to also bring to not only our dealers but to South Africans what is the importance of our dealers in our ecosystem. If you look at financial services, for an example, there's a portion, when we speak about the 5% contribution that the automotive industry is making, there's a portion of the financial services that is not accounted for in auto. It's accounted for in financial services. Take, for an example, WesBank. WesBank is doing business today in South Africa only for selling cars, nothing else. ABSA Vehicle and Asset Finance, division of ABSA, the business they do, selling cars. But that contribution to the GDP is not accounted for in auto, it's sitting in financial services. So if we were to strip really those areas that really contribute to the automotive industry directly, that 5% that I spoke about could actually be higher, much higher than it is currently stated. Because the 5% is currently made up of manufacturing and retail, only those two.
So Mike, if we put the industry through a medical today, right, what would the doctor say about the automotive industry in South Africa?
Well, at least I can confirm that the doctor will not take the industry into ICU.
It's a relief.
So we're not at ICU. We're still at the emergency room, though. And I suppose we'll stay in ER for some few months to come, primarily because of two things. So I think the tariffs that we see coming out of the United States will have an impact on the sector. There's no doubt about that. We know that for a fact. If you look at our numbers, for an example, you compare the first half of 2024, which was last year, and compare with our performance, and I'm talking only exports, with this year, we're down 82%. So we exported far less vehicles this year than we did last year. 82% drop in relation to exports that went into the United States, because that's the country that we are zooming into now. We used to export, around 25,000 odd vehicles into that country. We went down by more than, like I said, 82%, just in the first 6 months of this year. So there's no doubt. I think the impact of those tariff is definitely going to hurt. But I think what we are pleased about is that the impact is also not necessarily going to be universal across all the OEMs. I think there are those that are going to feel the pinch a lot more relative to others, primarily because if you look at our business models in the South African market, I think we've been very fortunate because a lot of our OEMs have diversified their markets quite very neatly. We're currently exporting to 102 different markets around the world as the automotive industry, and these are fully built vehicles. When you look at both fully built vehicles and components, we export 155 different markets around the world. And the United States is very important to us because it is the second biggest market where we are exporting vehicles into. And with them now posturing the manner in which they are, we obviously now need to see how best we can be able to move furniture around, so that instead of producing vehicles for that market, we are still able to produce vehicles in South Africa, but to a totally different market around the world. And I think Africa has become a very attractive destination for us, and our teams are now very aggressive looking into Africa to be able to explore opportunities into the continent.
It is a global supply chain. COVID taught us this.
Yeah.
That these parts move all the way around the world. Every country needs every other country. That was all set up in a world where trade barriers were not the thing. And now suddenly one day they're up, suddenly one day they're down. That must be throwing chaos.
It is. And I think the reason why it is throwing that chaos is because, remember, the tariff regime that Trump has introduced is not directed to few companies and few countries. It is actually directed to a multiplicity of different countries around the world, including neighbors like Canada, including the United States, closest allies, countries that have been with the US, time immemorial, countries that fought wars with the United States. Currently, those countries are unfortunately, subject to these particular tariffs. And it's very sad to see how the US administration has postured around these particular tariffs. But we are hopeful that South Africa will definitely be able to find different ways to be able to insulate itself from this particular crisis. I think, in our view, in our assessment, we believe very strongly that this is a temporary measure, and we're hopeful that in the next 6 to 18 months, we will certainly be able to weather the storm.
But it's temporary, but it hurts,
It does.
I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, the natural reaction to that is to protect yourself from that in future in case it comes back. But as you mentioned, it's the diverse 115 different markets.
Yeah.
Maybe it'd be take from the US, but those markets will surely become more important in the future in the thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our advantage, Alan, in the South African construct, our strategy now, if you look at our strategic objective to penetrate the African continent, it's a very deliberate strategy, because we are already producing vehicles that are absolutely needed in the African continent. We are a buggy producer, a very strong buggy producer. If you look at Toyota has an amazing Toyota Hilux, which is a market leader in the buggy segment of the market. We have VW that produces the Amarok. We have Ford, which produces the Ranger. We've got Isuzu that produces the D-Max. You've got Nissan that produces the Navara. The only two manufacturers that are not producing buggies is BMW and Mercedes-Benz. So out of the 7 manufacturers we have in the country, 5 of them already are producing buggies, which is amazing. And it positions South Africa fantastically to be able to penetrate the African continent. Because if you look at the driving terrain in Africa, even also in South Africa, I'm sure if I counted the potholes I had to navigate getting to the podcast this afternoon, we still have challenges in relation to our road infrastructure and the network and so on. It's even worse when you go up north into the continent. So I think we've got a fantastic product that we can be able to offer the African continent. All we need to do is get our boots on the ground and make sure that our vehicles are definitely penetrating the continent.
So as Africa grows, South Africa gets a huge benefit from it as well.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned a lot of the manufacturing OEMs, right? So we are at a sort of nexus in the industry. It's certainly the most exciting time that I can remember, because every time you go onto Instagram, there seems to be a new brand launching in our market. And if you think over the last 2 years, we've had more new brands, mostly Chinese, but also other brands coming into our market. Now it's a moment of change. It's like what social media did to the internet, and that's what's happening today in our market.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reminded, remember BlackBerry, phones.
Yes.
Or Nokia phones. We are at that time where BlackBerry and Nokia are taking a backseat a little bit. And we are now beginning to see the introduction of Apple, Samsung, Huawei phones into the market. So I think the South African automotive industry is going through a similar transition. But what is interesting is also the robustness of our traditional brands. A lot of people were already starting to write off our traditional brands, that they're going to be having a hard time because of the new kids on the block. But our traditional brands are equally very robust. They've looked at their value proposition. They're providing fantastic deals to our customers. Our price points are also improving fantastically to be able to make sure that they compete with, obviously, these new brands that are coming. The new brands are also, helpful, to be able to shift and also shake the market a little bit. We need the disruption. I think the disruption was absolutely necessary. Also to be able to remind consumers in South Africa that the traditional brands that we've known for many years and loved for decades are not the only thing that is available. There's too many other brands that we need to be able to test and think about. I mean, in South Africa today, Alan, in a very short period of 4 years, today in 2025, we've got 16 Chinese brands in South Africa today and growing in a very, very short space of time.
Only a little bit of the brands available in China.
Absolutely.
Many more.
Absolutely. We obviously do not think that all of them are going to survive the South African market. I think there are those already that are battling. But certainly we want to allow them the space to settle down, test the South African market. We also know that many of them are not just only looking at the South African market as the only market that they are looking at and penetrating. I think many of them are coming to South Africa as a launching pad so that they can be able to go into the rest of the continent. And we are working with many of them already to be able to see what they can do also, because we don't want them to come and just import vehicles in South Africa. We're now beginning to say to them, they need to start looking at a different business case and whether they can, instead of importing cars into Africa, they need to also produce cars into Africa.
That's an important point, because if you look at brands like Toyota, Ford, Isuzu, not only have we bought lots of their cars, but they've given so much back because they have factories here, they invest in the infrastructure and the families, and that's where the 5% of GDP comes from.
Absolutely.
And so is in terms of an industry, is it from government, from NAAMSA, is the encouragement to them to bring your factories, bring your skills, bring your expertise, bring your capital into the country.
And your technology, because we don't want them to come to Africa, extract our minerals, and take those raw minerals into containers, ship them to China, beneficiate, create the technology in China, and bring us the finished product for us to assemble. We want them also to bring that technology so that we can be able to, next door to the plants and the mining companies that we have, instead of moving these minerals through a truck, we want to move these minerals through a conveyor belt next door, where we can be able to produce finished products that can go into our vehicles. And that's what we want to see. And we are now engaging with them quite very aggressively so that they can really be able to commit to South Africa and invest, because South Africa is also very hungry for new jobs. Young people are getting fantastic qualifications, but once they are qualified, they don't know where to go. And we believe very strongly that the automotive industry is a virgin territory. It's not a sunset sector. And it's a sunrise industry we want to really see, particularly as we move also into the production of new energy vehicles, or people call them electric vehicles. What play can we put forward to be able to position ourselves?
I hear you about the technology. 20 years ago, you used to think about how good the wheels were in the car and how it drove and the gearbox. But you get into a modern car, this is a piece of software.
Absolutely.
With some wheels attached to it, that happens to move along, but it's a beautiful piece of software that can do so much.
Absolutely. In fact, I had a very interesting conversation with one of the Chinese brands, and the CEO was saying to me, we are a technology company. We produce technology and software, and once that software is solid, we are then able to bring a car together to make that technology to start moving.
It's
So we have computers on wheels, effectively.
And we're a great testing ground. You take that technology on South African roads, where better can you test these things?
Absolutely.
The day the Chinese software can recognize our potholes, that'll be a great day for all of us.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned new energy vehicles, okay? Now, EVs, there's a lot of talk about EVs, but when you look at the figures coming from NAAMSA, there's not many sales. Did Eskom kill the whole idea in a South African consumer?
No, look, I think we're not there yet. I think the rate of adoption in South Africa, we knew that it is not going to be similar to what we see in China, in Europe. We knew that South African, are typical petrol heads. They love, their Verpas. They love the sound of their engines, and also that it will take some time for us to be able to socialize these technologies, these newer technologies, in order for us to be able to get a much more faster rate of adoption. And we knew that. And I think also all the companies that are bringing these newer technologies into the country are mindful of the fact that the adoption rates are not going to be at an accelerated pace. But I think it is encouraging to see that the numbers are actually going up. It is also encouraging to see that the rate of investment as well, because remember, we are now moving into the production of these new energy vehicles as well as South Africa. Currently, as we speak, Toyota is producing a new energy vehicle, a hybrid Toyota Cross from their plant in Durban. Ford Motor Company is producing a hybrid Ranger already in Silverton. BMW is the only plant globally that produces a plug-in hybrid X3 from their plant in Roslyn. And then, of course, Mercedes-Benz in East London is also producing a hybrid C-Class. And these are very, very well-considered decisions that our manufacturers have taken to be able to play in this space, although many of those vehicles are currently destined for the global market. But I think increasingly South Africans are beginning now to raise their hands to say, we want to now try this new technology. So I think the work that we now need to do as a sector is to socialize this technology much more aggressively than we've done before.
Because, of course, new energy vehicles is not just electric. That's the thing that comes to mind. But plug-in hybrids and hybrids, that seems to be... South Africans do like those.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a nice, let's call it transitional technology. Because remember, South Africa is not like Europe, where, driving from France into another country next door, it's a 200-kilometer stretch. South Africa, for you to drive from Musina to Cape Town, it's more than 2,500 kilometer stretch. You need to be able to give South Africans a level of comfort that if I'm going to go onto such a long road, I have the necessary range to be able to take me there. So I think there's a lot of work that we're still doing. Obviously, our battery technology is also improving. Previously, we used to have big batteries, but with less range that it affords you. Currently, those batteries are becoming smaller and smaller, but they're able to give you a much bigger range capability than ever before. So the technology is definitely improving, and we're hopeful that in the next 5 to 10 years, this will no longer be an issue whether you should be going for a new energy vehicles or not.
It might be sooner than that. Look, as Cars.co.za, we've been fortunate to review some of these vehicles on our YouTube channel, and I think the proposition of some of these vehicles, just the sheer power output, the speed, the range, less than 2 litres per 100 kilometres. I was watching one of Chiro's videos this morning. I mean, that's groundbreaking. That's amazing.
Absolutely. And I think we are going to see more of those coming into the market. And I think for me, the game changer is going to be the day when South Africa also produces its first pure electric vehicle. And I think that's going to be a game-changing day. And particularly if we are also able to keep those vehicles relatively cheap. Because currently, one of the biggest challenges that we have in the market is that these cars are still coming at a very, very hefty price. We do not have vehicles, for an example, below the 500,000 threshold. And because if you look at the NAAMSA numbers today, 63% of vehicles that we sold last year, 63% were vehicles under 500,000. That's a big number. So if we are able to bring those vehicles as electric vehicles, South Africans will absolutely jump into that space. Because if you go to China, you go to Europe, they already have vehicles that are affordable in the electric vehicle space. And of course, government is also supporting those manufacturers with incentives in order to encourage citizens to take up new energy vehicles as opposed to internal combustion.
I was going to ask about government because we want someone to blame. Why is an EV more expensive than a petrol?
Yeah, look, I think our current tax regime in South Africa requires some tweaking. We do have a very old tax structure. We've raised this with the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. If you look at, for an example, our ad valorem tax, has not been adjusted for the longest time. And we need to be able to sit around the table and really have a very, very progressive conversation around how best we can be able to adjust ad valorem tax in order to be able to make sure that we are able to bring down significantly, not just only EVs, by the way, also internal combustion engines are still attracting a very high rate of ad valorem. If you look at EVs, South Africa has a very, very interesting model, because when you compare, when you bring an EV in South Africa, you're actually paying more than you importing your internal combustion engine. Our tax, our import duties for internal combustion engines is currently hovering around 17%, while our import duties is around 25%. So we need that parity. We're not saying lower, the import duties for EVs, but at least bring them at the same rate, as opposed to having this big, equilibrium where you actually taxing those vehicles that are actually bringing benefits to our economy, because bringing EVs is good for our environment, right? And many other benefits that one can speak about. So we are engaging government to see how best we can be able to adjust.
And PHEVs, so plug-in hybrids and hybrids, just because they use a little bit of petrol, they're in the petrol camp, so they don't get taxed like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're saying we want now to have that conversation with government so that we can really be able to redefine the current model, because it doesn't make sense to anyone. And so that we can really be able to make sure that we think about how do we stimulate demand for these vehicles, because consumers are asking for better pricing. And it's very difficult for the manufacturers to just decide to pull the numbers down because of a number of challenges that we have with our tax regime. So I think the tax regime absolutely needs to be reconfigured urgently.
Now, speaking about government, I had the pleasure of attending your big event of the year, which was Auto Week in Cape Town last year.
Yeah.
Now, you're also building towards Auto Week in, now my foreign accent is going to murder the name, but Quebec. Did I
That's
even
good
get
enough.
close?
That's good enough.
Close.
That's good enough.
So you're aiming for that in October, but is government involved there this year as well? You brought the president last year.
And we're hoping to do the same this year again. In fact, we believe very strongly that the SA Auto Week 2025 is actually going to be our biggest event yet, better than last year. We are still also hoping that the president will be able to grace us with his presence, primarily not because we just want him to be there physically, but because of the role he plays, and also the acknowledgement that he has in relation to the contribution that the automotive industry is making to the South African economy. We also want him to be there to also stimulate investments, because we want him to use the SA Auto Week as a platform for him to be able to call on new investors to come to South Africa and showcase, the strength that they can be able to bring in helping us to grow our manufacturing base, because we need to grow the South African manufacturing capability sooner rather than later. And when people see government at the highest level getting involved, what more can you ask for?
It shows real commitment.
Absolutely.
Now, for you as CEO of NAAMSA, what are your main objectives for Auto Week this year?
Well, look, I think our main objective for the SA Auto Week this year it's really around how we can be able to work together with our partners, social partners, labor, government, and other key stakeholders to be able to attract new investments into South Africa. We really want to make sure that we're able to grow and protect the South African automotive industry. Our industry is under siege, and there's no doubt about it. I think there are a lot of challenges which are well documented and public, and we've made those public for the longest time. So what we want to do and achieve with the SA Auto Week is to bring all these thought leaders together in the same space to say, how do we work together? How do we speak in one voice in order for us to be able to protect and strengthen the South African automotive industry?
Because it does take all those stakeholders. There's one thing, I've never heard of a strike in the auto industry, so very much labour must be proactive in their involvement to build the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And this year it's also a very critical year because it's our negotiating year, by the way. As we speak today in this podcast, in fact, our negotiators are busy with NAAMSA, which is our biggest labor union in the auto sector, negotiating for new salaries for the next 3 years. And we are hopeful, obviously, that they will be able to find each other sooner because we don't want protracted negotiations which will lead to industrial action or strikes, as we call them here in South Africa. So we're really crossing our fingers that we will be able to find each other sooner rather than later.
And Auto Week is all 65 OEMs?
Absolutely. We obviously, there are those that participate differently. There are those that are participating on the program as speakers, as panelists. There are those that are participating throughout our exhibition centers because we are setting up a massive exhibition this year. And then, of course, there are those who are participating. For an example, we're activating 2 separate events leading up to the SA Auto Week. We are having what we call master classes. They're starting this Friday. And also having thought leadership roundtables that are also going to be taking place. We're also doing something very special this year, Alan. We're also going to implement a NEV road trip. Last year we did one where we moved from Johannesburg, through the Eastern Cape to Cape Town. This year we are doing 3 routes: one from Johannesburg to the Eastern Cape, another one from Durban to the Eastern Cape, and the last one from Cape Town to the Eastern Cape. And all those 3 routes will converge into the Eastern Cape, where we are hosting the Auto Week in 2025. So we are very excited about that. And one of the things why I'm here today is to be able to convince Cars.co.za to send us 1 or 2 drivers to join us, and also key content creators to join us on this very important road trip to the Eastern Cape.
Can we drag race all the way from Durban to...
As long as it's within the law, yes. We can make a plan.
Okay.
We don't want to be in trouble with the authorities.
Just in case anyone's listening.
Imagine, before the SA Auto Week, Cars.co.za content creators arrested for drag racing on a national road. That will be a catastrophe, right?
One of our guys recently was pulled over by a cop. And he goes, no, you're doing nothing wrong. I just wanted to see the car. Now, to DealerCon.
Yeah.
Right? Now, as NAAMSA, you represent OEMs, the guys that manufacture, that import. Now, for me as a consumer, the shop front is a dealership.
Yeah.
Right? So... And DealerCon is about dealerships and making sure that leg of the industry is lifted up and generates new ideas and new leadership. But for you as NAAMSA, what do you think you can get out of DealerCon as well?
Well, look, we see and look at the DealerCon as an important innovation, and we are very grateful to be partnering with Cars.co.za on this important event. And I want you to look at, you mentioned earlier that what would be my health assessment of the industry. I want you to look at the DealerCon as an umbilical cord between a mother and a child. A mother here is probably your OEM, and the child is your customer. And the DealerCon is that umbilical cord, that because the dealership is the important aspect that brings the two together. So I think the DealerCon for us as NAAMSA is absolutely very critical, because it helps us to be able to bring to the fore an opportunity where dealers can be able to come together under the same roof and be able to speak for the first time about issues and topics and thought leadership discussions that impacts directly on their business, and how they can work together to be able to strengthen the role that they play in that particular dealer space. So we believe very strongly that you cannot separate OEMs from the dealers, because there is that natural connection between the two. And that's why NAAMSA has already socialized the importance of the DealerCon, and we've already indicated to many of our OEMs and invited them to also make the time to be there physically. Obviously, there will be those that we are bringing to participate on the program at the DealerCon, but we're also bringing those who will be in the audience. So we will have a number of our CEOs both on stage and also in the audience to participate in some shape or form during the DealerCon, because it is very important to us, and we want to be able to make sure that this becomes an annual event that can be able to help us to drive strong conversations on how we grow the dealer space in our country.
And we're very grateful that you've done that, because you've brought some amazing names, which we will announce shortly. But thank you very much for that. But I loved your umbilical cord analogy, because when you buy an iPhone, you walk into an Apple shop, and that experience is curated from beginning to end. You feel the quality, you feel the brand, because they think about it right from the manufacturing, which is in another part of the world, right to there. But for an OEM, for a manufacturer,
yeah, and that's why, for us as NAAMSA, I always say, one of the most exciting thing in my day is during our meetings, where I bring all these 65 CEOs together under one roof, and these are competing partners. They compete and they fight big time for market share in the market. But when you get them in one room to be able to come and speak about common interest issues, the camaraderie and the ability for them to be able to align and come together on that common interest issue is amazing. And I think that's where we really want to be able to take the industry, so that the consumer is the most important person, irrespective to our individual interests that are narrow and commercially driven.
I'm sure they share as many interests with each other that they can approach together as they have got things to disagree about or compete with.
Absolutely.
So Mike, it's been absolutely fascinating to have you with us today. Some very insightful comments and thoughts that you've given us today. And I guess I will see you again 17th of September, Santon Convention Centre at DealerCon. Look forward to seeing you.
Absolutely. We'll certainly be there, full force. I'm told I'm on stage, and I look forward to participating at the DealerCon. Thanks,
Stage
Alan.
will be yours.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Mike.